Hello and welcome back for another video on the Pokemon Champions Draft League. It is currently week 3 and these are the current standings. I'm right in the middle of the pack at 1-1. Both of my matches went to game 3 actually, so I actually played the most games of anyone in our league. So here's my team again, just as a reminder. Okay, so this is the team I'll be playing against this week. Looking through their team, well, first of all, it's interesting because they have 10 Pokemon. A lot of the teams in our league only have 8 or 9 Pokemon, so they do have extra options. However, my team generally matches up pretty well, I'd say, except for a couple threats, which are Mega Steelix, Sylveon, and Orthworm. I've had some trouble dealing with Steel Pokemon with my team, and Sylveon's just really strong, so those are the ones I'm going to be trying to make sure I have answers for. On to the scouting report now, starting with their abilities. I think the main ones to look out for are Pixelate on Sylveon. They have Sandstream, and they have a few Pokemon that work well in the sand. Other than that, though, there isn't too much to talk about with their abilities, I think. Just a few things to keep in mind. Moving on to their speed stats now, you can see that my team is significantly faster than theirs. They do have a way to speed things up with Tailwind on Gliscor. So as long as I can prevent them from getting up Tailwind, I should be able to outspeed all their Pokemon. Even in Tailwind, I think I'd still be able to outspeed some of their slower Pokemon. So based on that, it might not really make sense for me to bring my own Tailwind. I think I can just rely on the natural speed of my Pokemon. So in terms of priority and priority blocking moves, you can see they have 2 Pokemon with Wide Guard, so I have to be a bit careful if I'm trying to use Blizzard in front of one of these Pokemon, or if I'm trying to use Hyper Voice with Primarina. They do have Quick Guard and Feint. I don't think either of those are super relevant, but I just have them listed here. Steadfast doesn't directly prevent a flinch, but if I flinch Machamp, then they're gonna be able to, I believe they get a speed boost. So probably don't want to flinch Machamp. And then Inner Focus, of course, prevents the flinch. Okay, so looking through their Pokemon, this is who I'm expecting that they'll bring. Although, I will say, I wouldn't be too surprised to see some of these other Pokemon. The Pokemon I would be most surprised to see is probably Appleton, who I feel doesn't match up well into my team. But I'm definitely expecting to see these Steel-type Pokemon and Sylveon, so those 3, definitely expecting. This is the team I brought this week. My thinking this week was to just try to bring like an overall good team. Something that I could even think about using on ladder, or at least that's the general concept. They have 10 Pokemon, they have a lot of different options, and I thought if I just have a generally good team, I think that will work well. So I wasn't necessarily trying to counter things too hard, I was just trying to get an all-around good team. So based off that, I have some decisions here, which I don't know in retrospect if they make the most sense, but it's what I ended up going with. So starting with Meowscarada, for example, I have a Choice Scarf here, which, looking at their speed stats again, I don't know if this was strictly necessary, although because of the Protean ability, it made sense, I think. And I was just trying to pick moves that match up well into their team, so these are the moves I selected, so I should be able to hit pretty much everything for super effective. For Talonflame, I have Acrobatics, Flare Blitz, Protect, and Tailwind. In retrospect, I don't really know if I need a Tailwind, as I was mentioning before, but I have it here. On Frostlass, I have Blizzard, Aurora Veil, Shadow Ball, and Protect. So pretty standard set there for Frostlass. For Beartic, I have Close Combat, Sheer Cold, Ice Punch, and Protect. So I have Sheer Cold there, and that's specifically because they have, Umbreon and they have Vaporeon, and those Pokemon can sometimes be pretty defensive, often bulking up, and I want to make sure I have answers for that. So, Sheer Cold is just a way to answer any potential stall. So that's my idea behind that. It has Slush Rush, so if I have the snow up, it'll be able to move faster. On Primarina, I have Moonblast, Hyper Voice, Protect, and Perish Song. So Perish Song is another answer for those stall tactics. So, I want to make sure I have ways to deal with any potential bulky Pokemon or any Pokemon that are trying to stall me out. Okay, and then finally I have Cerulege because I want to make sure I have answers for their steel types. So specifically for Orthworm, Cerulege would match up well. I have Poltergeist, Bitterblade, Protect, and Bulk Up. Alright, so yeah, with that I think we can get into the matches now, and we'll see how it goes. So unfortunately I had initially forgotten to record. I realized I wasn't recording at the end of the first turn. So I'm just going to talk through what happened in the very first turn of our first game. So just to start out, the Pokemon that they had brought on their team were Steelix, Machamp, Vaporeon, Appletun, Umbreon, and Sylveon. So based off that, I decided to bring Frostlass, Primarina, Talonflame, and Meowscarada. And I led Talonflame and Meowscarada. They led Umbreon and Vaporeon, or Umbreon and Sylveon. So in the first turn, when I saw this lead, I was thinking, okay, I don't need to worry about getting up Tailwind, right? Because I'm outspeeding. But I want to make sure I can deal with their Sylveon because I don't want it getting off Hyper Voice. And so what I decided to do is to double into Sylveon. So I used Acrobatics into Sylveon and I used Flower Trick into Sylveon. And my idea here is that I can just KO it on the first turn. And I wasn't too worried about what Umbreon could do. So that's what I did. It did KO Sylveon, and then Umbreon actually used Toxic, which I was surprised to see, into Talonflame. So it missed. And so that's where we are. Okay, so starting up again. So just went over what happened on the first turn. So they sent out Appletun, which I was surprised to actually see an Appletun. I think my team matches up pretty well here, so I decided to use Acrobatics into it, which will do a lot of damage. Meowscarada is locked into Flower Trick because of the Choice Scarf, so I'm just thinking about if I want to swap or not. But I decided to just Flower Trick into the Umbreon. So I actually get the one-hit KO on Appletun there. I don't know if that crit mattered or not. Acrobatics is really strong. Umbreon used Foul Play. Does quite a bit of damage. But I'm already feeling pretty good in this position. I'm up 4-2 now. And then when I see Machamp, I realize I can also just Acrobatics. So, yeah. Talonflame just doing a lot of work. Just hitting Acrobatics every turn with their Gale Wings. I was actually surprised that didn't KO when I saw that. So Umbreon gets the KO on Meowscarada, but at this point I feel pretty good about my position. Machamp is able to KO Talonflame. Both their Pokemon are just at so low of an HP though, and again, I have a speed advantage for this match because my Pokemon just naturally outspeed theirs. I wasn't necessarily sure here if Primarina is going to outspeed their Pokemon, and so what I decided to do is just Shadow Ball into Machamp, since I know Frostlass is going to outspeed their team, and then Moonblast into Umbreon. So I'm using Shadow Ball just in case they have Wide Guard, so I want to play around that. Umbreon can't one-hit KO Primarina, so this play I think is just really safe and it should always win. Okay, so with that, that's pretty much game one. It was extremely smooth, I'd say, just relying on the natural speed of my Pokemon. It just worked out very well. Okay, so going into game two, I was just thinking about how I might want to change my leads if I want to change my leads. And I was thinking about how they might adjust, and so based off that, I was thinking, how I should adjust to whatever they adjust to. I definitely wanted to lead again with Meowscarada, who's just really strong. And so I ended up going with this. So my thinking here is that, I have a fast Pokemon with Meowscarada who's going to always outspeed, and then Primarina is pretty bulky. Even though Talonflame did really well there, I decided, they might adjust, and, if they bring Steelix, for example, Talonflame doesn't really match up well into that Pokemon. So I wanted to adjust based off potentially seeing a Steelix. But they didn't bring Steelix here, they instead brought Umbreon and Vaporeon. Flower Trick into Vaporeon is just really strong, and a Moonblast into Umbreon. It's really good, so I have just a really straightforward play here. Something else I noticed from game one was that they didn't protect ever, so, I was thinking into game two, I had actually a note even about this. I was like, okay, they didn't ever really click protect, so maybe they just don't run protect. Or they just hesitant to use it. So I wasn't gonna try to worry about it. I was just gonna keep playing until they show a protect. I'm gonna keep playing as if they don't have protect. Okay, so they used Wish there, which was interesting. So when I saw that, I was like, okay, they might start going for some of their stall tactics. And so what I decided to do is Flower Trick into the Umbreon, and then I thought I could click Perish Song. So my idea here is Flower Trick can KO Umbreon, provided it doesn't protect, which I was assuming they wouldn't be using protect. And then the Perish Song will take out Sylveon, who could no longer switch. They do protect, but I think Perish Song still works well here, especially since Umbreon seems to be going for like a stall tactic. Sylveon launches Mystical Fire, which does quite a bit of damage, but we're able to survive. And so now it's a pretty interesting position because, we're all in Perish Song. They have 3 Pokemon left, so, if they want to prevent them from getting KO'd from Perish Song, they're going to have to swap them out, but they can't swap them both out the same turn. So I'm just thinking if I want to swap here, or if I want to wait to swap. So I ended up using Protect there. I'm not sure what I was thinking with Protect. Maybe I was just trying to see what they're trying to do. I don't remember exactly what my thinking was with that. And I launched Flower Trick into Sylveon. Okay, so now it's pretty interesting. If they want these Pokemon to survive the Perish Song, they're going to have to swap them out, one out this turn and one out the next turn. So I just thought I'd Protect with Frostlass, and then I can just Hyper Voice here. I was expecting to see a swap here, but Hyper Voice does good damage into a lot of Pokemon. And it should be able to KO the Sylveon if they leave it in. So again, they don't swap anything, which I was really surprised to see, because that guarantees one Pokemon's going to go down this turn. Or go down to Perish Song, because next turn they can only swap one. So Sylveon actually avoids the Hyper Voice, so that means they were running Bright Powder, which is an interesting tech choice. The Protect works well there on the Frostlass. Okay, so now Parasong is down to 1 on all the Pokemon. They can only save 1 Pokemon here, so I'm assuming they're going to swap out Umbreon, because Sylveon has such a low amount of health. And so I think I'm in a safe position to use Aurora Veil with Frostlass, because I'm expecting a swap from Umbreon. And I of course want to save Sylveon's, or save Primarina, so that's why I swapped there. So I got the Aurora Veil. They don't swap either of their Pokemon, so again I was kind of surprised to see that. They do launch a Foul Play, but because of the Aurora Veil, it doesn't do too much damage. So yeah, without the Aurora Veil, I would have been KO'd that turn. So maybe their thinking was that their last Pokemon should be able to take out whoever, my Primarina and whoever else I have in the back, which in this case was Beartic. But at this point, I pretty much have, have the game won. They ended up having Machamp in the back, so maybe they didn't feel like they had a good swap. And so that was my match. So I'd say this week went pretty smoothly. My team just generally outsped their team. And I think Parasong worked well for me. I have a feeling maybe they weren't too experienced against Parasong. Because I think they could have done something else there instead to prevent the Parasong KOs. But my team just matched up well, I guess, into theirs. I was also a bit surprised to not see them bring Steelix, who I think could have done well against my team, provided they had answers to Primarina. Okay, so looking back on this week, I'd say that Meowscarada continues to be really strong for my team. Also, Talonflame's been working out pretty well for me. But I think the big takeaway that I want to think about moving forward is how to better use Parasong. I think it opens up a lot of interesting options, and if I can use it well, I think it'll improve a lot of my matchups. So that's something I'll be thinking about for the next weeks. But with that, I think that's it for this week. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.